What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Stay of the Program series on the Crossover U podcast. We are your hosts, as always, Kanaye and Josh. And today we get to talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide. A little bit of a disappointing end to what could have been a really amazing, unforgettable season for Alabama. Just considering you bring back almost everyone you had from your Final 14 the previous year. You had some guys like Big Cliff Amore who you think are going to address problems like rim protection. And then you just pretty much get killed by fundamentals against the Duke Blue Devils in the Elite Eight. So definitely disappointing there. Nonetheless, we're going to talk about what Alabama's lost, what they've added, how we feel about Nate Oats, where Alabama stacks up in the SEC and nationally, and just what the vibes are in Tuscaloosa going into next season. But before we get into that, if you like this podcast or anything else you see on this channel, as always, engage with our content any way you can, like subscribing, liking the videos, or just telling other people about it. It really does help with influencing YouTube's algorithm and just getting these videos out to more people. So let's get started with Alabama's loss. It's a lot. It's definitely going to be really hard to replace the guys that they're losing.
I mean, the big talk is Mark Sears, but also Brett Nelson and Cliff Amruri. All three of them were out of eligibility, so it's not the worst problem. But Sears was your offense for the past 2 years. He was your big guy, and he made Bama the team they were after the Brandon Miller era ended. But losing Chris Youngblood, Diabate, Darren Reed, and Jareen Stevenson to the portal, these are very big guys. Particularly guys like Jareen Stevenson and Darren Reed. These are players that could have stepped up. And honestly, he was very good in conference play. I'll say that as much. These are guys that could have stepped up, been great parts of the lineup for the next season. They leave, and that kind of leaves a bigger hole than I think a lot of us would like to admit from the get-go. I kind of want to give this a 6, maybe even a 5, considering the projected points per game that they keep losing from a guy like Stevenson and Reed.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say 5. I, for one, want to come out and say I think Mohamed Diabate is awesome. I think he deserved way more minutes than what he got this past season. I think he's gonna be great at Kentucky this next year. But of course, you lose him. It is what it is. You are also losing Mark Sears, Grant Nelson, Chris Youngblood, Cliff Amore to graduation. Those guys out of eligibility. Mark Sears is one of my favorite players I've ever watched. There is no replacing Mark Sears. He got you 20 points per game-ish 2 years back, 18.6 as passer, was a first-team All-American. There's no replacing Mark Sears, and just incredible shot making from beyond the arc he brought. But again, losing guys like Mohamed Diabate, Darren Reed, Jareen Stevenson, those are things, losses you could have avoided, probably should have avoided. I think a lot of people would have expected those guys to be back in Tuscaloosa. That's not the case. I think a 5 is more than fair to give Alabama here.
100%. It sucks. It really does losing a guy like Sears. It was an era under him. He brought them to their first Final Four just 2 years ago. There was hope and honestly a lot of expectation for them to win it last year. Both me and Kanaye had them doing so. That didn't end up happening. But losing these guys makes it almost incredibly hard to even think about going back to the national championship game.
Most definitely. And now to get into what Alabama has added, I think it's most important to start with what they were able to keep. One of the most important draft deadline decisions was LeBaron Philon. He was a guy who honestly could have been a late lottery pick, if not mid-first round guy. He decided to take his name out of the draft, return to Alabama. He's a guy who I expect to fully jump and make a big jump, I should say. Could end up being on all SEC watch, maybe third-team All-American territory. He could approach as a starting point guard this year. Now it's Sears, no longer with the program. He's a really good playmaker in terms of being able to pass the ball. I'm assuming his scoring numbers should jump now with Mark Sears no longer there. They are also bringing back Aden Holloway, who's really good at Auburn, obviously played this past year, his first season with Alabama. Definitely another guy who I expect scoring numbers to jump once again with a lot of those guys we mentioned no longer with the program. Latrell Wrightsell is also back, along with Aiden Sherrill and Houston Mallett. Both guys will bring some added shooting to a Nate Oats program that will never lack shooting. In terms of what they're adding in transfer portal-wise, they're bringing in Jalil Bethea, who I'm very high on. I honestly think that he had a lot of untapped potential at Miami. I think Nate Oats could unlock it here at Bama. They are also bringing in Noah Williamson from Bucknell, who averaged near 18 points per game this year, and Taylor Bowen from Florida State. Kind of same deal as Jalil Bethea. I think he needs to get out of Florida, go down to Bama, unlock a lot of his untapped potential. And they're also bringing in Keaton Bristow from Tarleton State.
Definitely. I really do like a lot of what they kept. Obviously, we can talk about LeBaron Philon all they want. Latrell Wrightsell is a huge deal. Holloway can really blossom in his junior year. Jaleel Bethea is the real diamond in the rough that Oates was able to find. He was a 5-star walking into his freshman year last year at Miami. Miami sucked. They couldn't really do anything with him, and he really didn't show off the potential that he has. Now he has that potential. Now he can really be in the role he was expected to be. And Williamson and Bowen are kind of like the next iteration of Grant Nelson and Cliff Omaruri together. And I think they might be better as a connection. And then we didn't really talk about it, but London Jamison and Davion Hannah are both top 50 freshman prospects that are coming in.
Yeah, very high on London Jameson. I think he has a chance to be a contributor off the bench right away, I should say, for Nate Oats. I got to say, this team's deep. They might not have the star power they did this past year, but they got a lot of guys who are in positions to make really big leaps and make big strides in growing as players. And I do think they have a very, very deep rotation, a plethora of guys they're going to be able to turn to at almost every position. So where would you have the ads?
I kind of want to lean towards a 7. I get it, the starting 5 won't be exactly the best. It's definitely a downgrade from last year, but the bench increases. And
Yeah.
it's going to help a team like Alabama, who's great with using as many players as possible.
Yeah, they definitely don't have the big name guys they had this past year. But I'd honestly argue this team might end up being deeper than what it was this past season for NATO. And it could just end up being a death by a thousand cuts for that. That might just be the route Alabama has to take to win games this year. And I honestly could see it working. Now, before we get into how we feel regarding Nate Oats, I think it is important to give our projected starting lineup. If I'm not mistaken, both me and Josh had a lineup of LeBaron Philon, Aiden Holloway, Jalil Bethea, Taylor Bowen, and Noah Williamson rounding it out. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's what we both had.
Yeah. And I think there are places for, like we said before, London Jamison and even Taylor Bowen, or not Taylor Bowen, Aiden Sherrill to hop
Yeah.
into larger roles in the coming parts of the season. But like we said before, this starting 5 is not a big one. It's not one you expect to see all 40 minutes of the game. And Oates is pretty good with his bench typically, so expect to see a lot of changing around over the coming weeks. I mean, they benched Sears and it worked, so they can do a lot.
Yeah. Now, speaking of you mentioning Nate Oats bench and Mark Sears, I feel like it's a good time to talk about Nate Oats. How do you feel regarding Nate Oats? Because I feel like there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. He's had the success. He's been a 1 seed. He's made a Final Four. He's also lost in really just embarrassing fashion to Duke this past year, where they really just got beat by how fundamentally sound Duke's offense ran. Alabama, they were never a great defensive team the last 2 years, but really they were just getting annihilated by backdoor cuts and the pick and roll between whoever was handling the ball for Duke and Kamad Malawach. And it was just really a tough watch to see as someone who's watching the game and had to watch one of their favorite players in Mark Sears' college career. And I honestly don't know how to feel about Nate Oats going into this year.
I think it's definitely a up and down one. Nate Oats has always been an up and down type of guy. He had the Brandon Miller ever, which was crazy good, and that kind of fizzled out, losing to San Diego State in the Sweet 16. They come in the year after, they do a little magic trick, make the Final Four. Everyone's like, this is the best Bama team ever. Let's see if they can go for the Natty. And then they become the second best team in their own state. And not to throw in Auburn, and you can watch the video if you want, but Auburn's a better program. Oates is not the best coach in his own state. And I think that's a huge deal. And it makes for a great rivalry, don't get me wrong. The Iron Bowl next year is going to be just as good as last year. But it leaves a bad taste in your mouth if you're an Auburn fan and if you're Nate Oats. You need to prove it not just to the world, but particularly to your own state that you are the better team in the college basketball sphere. And right now, they're little brother. You don't want to be little brother at all.
Yeah, I love how you bring up that point. I do think Nate Oats is one of the best offensive coaches in the game right now. Just the mind he has and all the sets he runs, the really courage to let his guys take as many threes as they do over the last 2 years. I'm sure will be the same case this year. I think he needs to improve a lot in how he coaches defensively. If he can do that, then he's going to be a really, really good coach, and Alabama will be fine. But as of right now, I think I'm going 7. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt just because he's been a 1 seed before, because he's made a Final Four before. But again, the flaws are definitely there, and they're really hard to pass over.
Easily. I would have given him an 8 last year, but the 2024 season really showed a lot of the open wounds and problems Oat has with his offense. and his defense. I think there's just only so much you can get off of your offensive capabilities, especially if you're not focused on defending. And that got to Auburn, that got to Alabama a lot quicker than it should have. And when the team looks like this, I don't feel like the offense is going to be much better. It will probably be actually worse than last year. And that means defense will be super important. And I don't really trust Oates with defense. It's never been his strength.
Yeah, I definitely hear you out with your points there. Now, you mentioned Auburn a little bit earlier. Of course, the Iron Bulls should be really, really good once again. Those are going to be two of the best teams in what is the SEC this year. How do you feel about the Crimson Tide and where they stack up in the conference?
I like them being that 3 to 5 spot. They're definitely not on the tier of Florida, and they're not really on a tier with Kentucky. They're definitely going to be playing with Auburn, but Auburn is, like I said before, big brother in this year. And honestly, it's been like that for the past 2 years now, saying. I don't know if they can really climb any higher, but the floor isn't that high. I don't see them really being below like a Mississippi State or a Texas A&M. SEC is going to be a gauntlet.
Yeah, I definitely hear you out there. I think their floor is still very, very high. I do view them as a tier below both Florida and Kentucky, probably on the same level as around in Auburn. I do think the Iron Bowl is going to be very, very crucial seating wise this year. And I will say, while Auburn's roster might look more talented on paper, I do think the retention that Alabama has where Auburn doesn't is something that is worth noting. I think having guys who have been in the program for several years is going to give them a slight advantage, potentially maybe in that first matchup against Auburn. Once they match up the second time, who knows? Could go either way. But I do think continuity is so important in college basketball. Auburn does not have that whatsoever. With only one returner, Todd Pettiford, and Alabama has a plethora of guys coming back who know how to run Nate Oats' offense. They know what he wants, and I do think that is going to help them. But that being said, the SEC being a gauntlet, I do think they are in the second tier of teams in that conference, and there is going to be a lot of opportunity for resume building, quad one games that they're going to be playing in. I'd probably give them an 8 here. Honestly, I think the SEC is going to be really, really good. I understand they're not in that first tier, but they are going to get a lot of opportunities to prove to the rest of the country that they are still a really good team.
I actually want to give them the 7. We gave Auburn an 8. I just feel like I said before, Auburn is just that small bit better than Bama right now. I don't want to necessarily hate on Bama, but I think this rivalry will be more towards the Auburn side of things. And until Bama can prove that otherwise, they're just a little bit below what Auburn can be, and therefore what they can be in the SEC.
Yeah, I hear you out there. I honestly think Alabama and Auburn match up really, really well. I think I'm really excited for the Iron Bowl this year. Like last year, I felt they matched up really well last year. I think same deal this year, where again, one team you got no continuity, the other one you got a lot. One team you got a lot of talent, the other one not as much. I'm willing to go 7, but I do think Alabama and Auburn are a little bit closer than some people might think.
Yeah, I think they definitely split the series. If anything, it'll be a battle of the numbers. Who can win it by more? Who wins in their own home turf? It's going to be a huge deal.
Now, what are the vibes in Tuscaloosa going to this next season?
It's kind of like how we viewed Arizona. And once again, if you want to watch the Arizona video, you can. They're moving on from the Mark Sears. That's a big, big change. I think a lot of Crimson Tide fans are going to take a little bit of time to adjust. And this is not really the starting five that startles people. This is kind of like a iffy type of team from the get-go. There was a lot of opportunity, don't get me wrong, but it's not like previous times. There's no Brennan Miller, no Grant Nelson, or Mark Sears like that. There's nothing flashy to get Alabama fans going. And Alabama is known for having the flashy players. You just look at their football team, look at what they've always produced. This is not really the Alabama way. I don't want to be mean on that point, but I'm not really convinced if I'm a Crimson Tide fan that this team is going to do that well. And a national championship is right now out of reach for me.
Yeah, I also think a national championship is out of reach for the Crimson Tide. I don't see this team as being able to get to a Final Four. I think their ceiling probably is a Sweet 16 at most an Elite 8. But again, I'd probably go Sweet 16. It is going to be tough for Crimson Tide fans to really adjust from not having Mark Sears and just considering what he did the last 2 seasons and being an All-American, being one of the greatest scorers in the country the last 2 seasons. And you really don't have really any guys that have that kind of name value that Mark Sears, Grant Nelson, and some of the other guys that had over the last 2 seasons. That being said, I do think you do have a chance to watch some guys take leaps, and maybe that'll be something Crimson Tide fans remember, where they say a guy like an Aden Holloway or LeBaron Fallon, smaller role, come back, play at an all league, potential All American level. We'll see. But yeah, vibes I would probably, just considering that you kind of missed out on the opportunity to potentially win a national championship this last season, and then you reload, but your team doesn't really look like it has that type of a ceiling, I'd probably go six.
Yeah, I would go 6 too. It's just, and I'm going to hammer this home every time we talk about Bama for the rest of the season. It's beating, beating Auburn. You
Yeah,
have to win at least one game against Auburn to feel good if you're an Alabama fan. Maybe that's the best thing you can get from this season. No offense, but if you are not the best team in your own home state, that's a big deal. I think there should be so much pride in that. I'm glad the Iron Bowl is looking great in the college basketball sphere because it's not in the football sphere. But as a Bama fan, don't expect too much.
yeah. And I think that's going to pretty much take care of everything we had in this episode of the State of the Program series today. As always, it goes a long way with you guys engaging with our videos. And I am actually quite excited to see Alabama in action this year. I'm a big LeBaron Philon fan. I fully expect a big leap from him. As Josh has said numerous times, the Iron Bowl should be cinema this year. Just as good as last year, if not maybe even better with these teams, maybe being even more better matched up than they were last season. But as always, engage our videos in any way you can. And until next episode, we'll see you all next time.